All right, as mentioned, I do have the presentation for tonight. Jason asked me to present on the topic of Nano VNA. Some of you may or may not have heard of Nano VNA before. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. I've got a presentation that I'll run through, and we'll talk about Nano VNA, what it is, why you might need one, and I've got some live demonstration that goes along with it as well. So title of the presentation is what is Nano VNA and why do you need one? And hopefully we'll answer that before we're done here. We'll start out talking a little bit here, trying to answer the question of what is the VNA? It's a vector network analyzer. And we'll step back away from the VNA a little bit and start with one instrument, a spectrum analyzer, that you may be familiar with. Yeah.
If you care, we can see the preview slides.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Clint. I appreciate that. We'll go with that. How about that?
Better, thanks.
Yep, awesome. So vector, we'll step back and talk about a spectrum analyzer, an SA. This allows us to measure unknown signals in the frequency domain. We can look at things like harmonics and phase noise and sidebands and actually get a visual representation of the signal that's out there. Fantastically useful instrument. We can actually demodulate and measure these complex signals, and again, a great addition to a workbench. They tend to be fairly expensive. An inexpensive one runs in the $1,500 to $2,000 range, and up into the many kilobucks, especially with wider bandwidths and better specifications. Kind of a step beyond that, we jump into the scalar network analyzer range, or SNA. A spectrum analyzer, if we tack a tracking generator onto it, really becomes an SNA. It lets us analyze scalar components. We can display magnitude versus frequency, but we miss out on the phase measurements. We can't measure complex impedance with an SNA, but we can use it to measure and characterize filters and other devices. And this is the basis of some fairly inexpensive and approachable antenna analyzers and Arduino projects that are out there. For those that are familiar with the Ham Radio 360, Ham Radio Workbench antenna analyzer project, that's really based on an SNA design, where we're able to then characterize filters and antennas and other things. So that brings us then to a VNA. And VNA, where we use a spectrum analyzer to analyze signals with an unknown frequency, a VNA allows us to measure signals with a known frequency because it contains both a source of that signal and a receiver, and has the ability to compare the amplitude and the phase information of that signal. And we look at that in a couple of different ways. We look at a ratio of either the reflected to the incident signal or the transmitted signal to the incident signal. And those ratios then allow us to analyze and characterize that signal. Now, the one that's pictured here is a nice Roden Sports. It's probably $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 instrument. Very significant investment, well out of the reach of all but the most expensive labs out there. But we as hobbyists are always looking for the next best thing, and one of those things is the Nano VNA. 1 second, I've got some background noise. I need to mute some microphones here. 1 moment. All right, we'll continue here. So we're always looking at ways that we can do what we need. We don't necessarily need that top of the line instrument with, let's say, for instance, frequency range bandwidth all the way up into, 50, 60 gigahertz range. We're working with primarily HF, VHF, some UHF, and that's the bulk of what we deal with. So a Nano VNA is a very simple instrument with a limited feature set and capabilities. On the low end, you can find them about $50. High end, 125-ish. Frequency range, like I said, is limited. Above 300 megahertz, they're using harmonics of the synthesizer that they're using. Very low RF output. Maximum on most of these is about 1.25 milliwatts. That's 1 dBm. And limited dynamic range compared to a professional instrument that might have 90 or 120 dB of dynamic range. We're 30 to 60 on the best. We're also limited to 101 points per segment. We'll talk about that in a little bit and a way to get around that. But you can see here one of the examples with the Nano VNA F, some of the specs that are on the range there. The original kit design for the Nano VNA was developed by ED555 and was originally released only in Japan. And it was truly a kit. You paid your money, you got your parts, and maybe you put it together when it was all done. We'll show you a picture of it here in just a moment. That kit went out of production fairly quickly, and a developer by the name of Hugin took that design, enhanced it, and then released his work as an open source design. And since then, a number of Chinese manufacturers have latched onto this simple design that was released as open source. And there's truly a proliferation of designs and variants based on that original design. Some improvements, there's a lot of knockoff copies. We'll talk about that a little bit here in a bit. So do your research and make sure that you're getting the instrument that you want for the price that you're investing. There's a lot of variation, whether they have a battery or not, if they've got a metal case or any shielding at all, the quality of the manufacturer and the quality of the components that go into it. Up in the upper left, you can see the original Nano VNA kit set there by ED555. There's an extra D in this particular graphic that I found. It's EDY555. The Hugin design, Nano VNA F. There's clones, different ones, and a Nano VNA 2.0 that you see down there in the lower right. It's kind of the latest version prototype that's just now coming onto the market. I mentioned sources. A few things that you can look at. Newelec is a seller of some reputable SDRs and other devices out there. They do have their own version of a Nano VNA clone out there. Arnell Electronics out of Ohio sells the Nano VNA H4 and the Nano VNA SAA2. It's really a spectrum analyzer variant of the Nano VNA. The H4 steps the screen size up from 2.8 inches diagonal to 4 inches diagonal. The Nano VNA F is a 4-inch variant in a metal case, and Deepelec is the retailer there. They sell on AliExpress. If you just search for Deepelec, you will find their website, and that will link you to the correct store. Do proceed with some caution on Amazon, eBay, AliExpress. There's a lot of inferior clones out there, and it's important to make sure that you're going back to the original seller. These are some reputable sources that are, again, reputable and stand behind their products. So let's jump into the VNA and what it can do for you, why you might want one, now that we know what it is. Let's talk first a little bit about some basic measurements, and I'm going to keep this as simple as I can, but I think it's important in the demonstration portion that you understand some of these principles, even though they're a little technical. So we talk first of all about S parameters. Those are scattering parameters, and they're ratios, as I mentioned a few slides back, of reflected and transmitted signals to the incident signal. Slide here in a second will illustrate that graphically. Note that the Nano VNA is limited in what it can do. We only get the S11 and S21 measurements. We can graph Smith charts, we can graph SWR, and we can also do something that's called time domain reflectometry that allows us to send a signal down a line and then listen for the reflections coming back due to impedance mismatches, which lets us determine location of faults or lengths of cables, those kind of things. Some real world examples here that we'll share. So I mentioned the S11, S12, the scattering parameters here. And if you think of RF in this analogy to light, this is a slide from some Agilent now Keysight training material. We've got the incident ray coming in. That's the main beam, if you will. And we've all looked in that fish tank and things are kind of twisted and distorted. Some of the light makes it through. That's the transmitted. But if we hit it at just the right angle, we also get some reflections. We can see a little bit of the world around us. And very much like that, RF, as it makes a transition between impedance or between devices, some of that RF is reflected back while some of it is transmitted on its way. The lower part of that slide shows DUT. That stands for device under test. And you see the same graphic that's there showing the incident wave and the reflected wave. So we're taking the ratio incident reflected, we're taking the ratio incident transmitted, and those become our S parameters. I won't get into the deep detail here, but again, from Agilent's training material here, the S11 is telling us what the input match is, and the S21, which is actually the transmission, basically from port to port, is the gain or the loss that's there. So if we look at the top half of this graphic, you'll see the incident signal. The transmitted is a single path through, so we're measuring either gain or loss along the way, and the match is measured by the reflection and the ratio that's there. No reflection means that everything was absorbed into the load. Reflections, we have some phase associated with that. 0 degrees, we've got an open. 180 degrees, it's a short on the other end. So those are our basics of the S parameters, and about as deep as we're going to get into the technical aspects of making measurements with a VNA today. We talk a lot about mismatches, and this is just a simple table illustrating that when we start working with devices like a VNA, we're going to start dealing with ways that we represent that mismatched impedance. And generally, you're going to see that in a measurement called return loss. And here in the ham world, we're used to talking about SWR, specifically voltage or VSWR. And I put that in parentheses because the ham world, we talk SWR. In the engineering world and out there generally, we're talking about voltage standing wave ratio or VSWR. And it's really the same. We just refer to it a little bit differently and simplify it a bit in the ham world here. But we can map a return loss to a SWR. And as we're looking, the higher the return loss, basically the more power that's transmitted to the load, the better our SWR. And you can see that in the table that's over here. Also in the mismatch in dB, reflected power, through power. You'll see as we get down here to a return loss of 40 dB, we're talking an SWR of 1.02, essentially a perfect match. So you'll see this thrown around, return loss, and when we show some real world examples here with the instrument, you'll see that, that as well. Smith chart, this is about as far as we're going to go into it, but the Smith chart is available for display on the Nano VNA. Smith chart lets us do some very complex math with some imaginary components to solve problems that we might have matching antennas and transmission lines and matching networks and circuits. But it's important that you understand that this can display a very simplistic Smith chart. The software that accompanies it as well can help quite a bit there as well. But we can display these parameters, these complex parameters, with phase and magnitude associated with them, such as impedance and admittance, these reflection coefficients, the S parameters. And really for our purposes, it's useful for visualizing a change in those parameters over a range of frequencies. And we'll demonstrate that here when we go live in just a minute. The last measurement that we can make, not the last, but the primary measurements that I'm touching on here, the last of those is TDR, or time domain reflectometry. And as I mentioned, we're sending a signal down a transmission line, and we're measuring the reflections coming back as well as the phase of those, whether it's in phase or out of phase. And we can detect connections, joints, places that we've put two pieces of cable together. We can tell if the cable is open or shorted on the other end. And because there's a velocity of propagation in that cable, if we know the characteristics of that velocity of propagation, then we can in turn characterize a length, which becomes very helpful. We'll demonstrate that here in just a few minutes as well. So the next step really to getting started with our Nano VNA is to start with calibration. And the best method for this, and we'll go through it here in just a minute, again with our live demo, is to perform a two-port calibration. We're calibrating with a short, and we've got a little connector here that's shorted. We've got an open, we've got a load, and then we also do a through and an isolation, and that lets us do a true two-port calibration. You can get by with just a simpler calibration, but at that point you're limiting your instrument to just reflection measurements, and the amount of time you save is pretty minimal. But it's important to understand, unlike an antenna analyzer that we can just pull out of the box and hook up and there's no calibration involved, we have to calibrate the Nano VNA as close to the device that we're testing as possible. We call that the test plane. So if you've got a length of coax that's going from the instrument to your device under test, you want to calibrate at that test plane at the point that you're testing that instrument. Otherwise, that cable also gets included, which may or may not be what you want. In a real-world system, that may be the test plane that we want to use. If we're characterizing, for instance, just an antenna or a filter, we may want to do it at the device itself. We do need to plan to calibrate over our planned sweep range. So if we're sweeping, let's say, the 40-meter band, and we want to jump up and sweep the 20-meter band, we need a new calibration in that range because we're changing our sweep, we're changing the parameters, and we're changing what the device is looking at. So really best practice is to calibrate and save calibration to memory for future use. Unfortunately, the Nano VNA device allows for 5 different memories. And so this is a screenshot from my Nano VNA showing here the calibration parameters. The C indicates the calibration and 0 for the memory number. So in this case, C0 represents the calibration for memory 0. And the different parameters that you see listed underneath tell us that we're calibrated for directivity, reflection tracking, source match, transmission tracking, and isolation. That's the DR, S, T, and X. So what you want to do is, as you've calibrated, make sure that shows up, and that tells you that your device is live and ready to go. Now let's have some fun. Let's actually do a real-world example here. We're going to minimize this. I'm going to switch cameras, and hopefully it plays along. I had some challenges with the cameras initially, and had to stop and rejoin. So hopefully it plays along nicely with us here. We'll stop sharing, and we'll switch cameras here just briefly. And hopefully it plays for us here. That's one camera. And fingers crossed here. And it's not going to play, is it? Let's try it here 1 second. Turn the camera off. And 1 second. Okay, that's the wrong camera again. Apologize. I've got 2 cameras with the same name here, which makes it just a little bit challenging. There we go. Hopefully that works. Can everyone see that the screen of the Nano VNA?
Yep. It's good, Paul.
Awesome. It did work. Amazing. All right. So what I've got here is on screen my Nano VNA sitting in a, basically the state that it would have when you normally turn it on. And we'll go through a little bit here on the instrument itself, and then we'll fire up a piece of software called Nano VNA Saver, which really expands the capability of the instrument tremendously. And keep in mind, this is a device that 120 bucks, including shipping from China. So it's pretty dramatic what it can actually do. Clint's got a question. It looks like he's raising his hand. Let's see what he's got.
I was just going to comment that everyone might want to hit the 3 little dots and pin your video up so it's bigger.
Good tip. So if you see mouse over my video, you'll see 3 dots to the right of the microphone. That'll let you expand it out. Great tip, Clint. Thank you. All right. So I've got the lights off here. I think everything should hopefully be in focus. A little bit here about the screen. At the top, we see our different channels or parameters. Down the side, you can see the calibration that I mentioned. And we see the different traces for each of those devices. These instruments use a resistive touchscreen, which is different than what we're used to on modern day devices. It's like the old school touchscreen. It's got a little drag to it. It's like the old compact iPad type screen. So a hard stylus works best, and just simply touch the screen and you can navigate through, adjust your calibration. It, in theory, would respond to a finger, but I found that it's, because of the size of the screen, it makes it very difficult to use. From this point, we can go in and select which marker we want. We can select from the display which trace we want. We can toggle traces on and off and do some other things. Really outside the scope of what I'm going to show here today. I really want to just show some measurements and what we can actually do with this particular instrument in a very easy manner. So the first thing that we're going to do here is jump in and we're going to do a quick calibration. So we're going to hit calibrate. We've got a span right now. If we go in and look at it here, our stimulus, we can set the start and stop. So we're right now scanning from 50 kilohertz to 1 gigahertz. Pretty broad range. With 101 points, each of these is a pretty big chunk of spectrum. So looking at something really doesn't give us the greatest idea of what it is. The device tries to make some guesses in between, but that's out there as an option. So we're just
demonstrating. Anything connected right now?
Sorry, what was that, Jason?
Do you have anything connected to the VNA right now?
No, I don't right now. So right here on these 2 ports here on the side, nothing's connected. It's just stray RF that's in the vicinity here. Okay, great question, Jason. So we're going to go in, we're going to do a quick calibration here. And as we step through each of these, it's going to prompt us for the next. So I'm going to look first of all for my open. And in theory, we could just leave the connector open. In practice, we want to be consistent with our calibration plane. So I've got a SMA connector that is an open, and we'll hit the open. And it's that simple for the open. You see it highlighted short. So we're going to jump in, and I've got an SMA connector that is shorted. And most of these instruments come with a very simple calibration set that honestly isn't half bad. You can pay the cost of an instrument in a single termination in the professional range. So we're dealing, again, hobbyist scale here, but for what it does, it's pretty amazing. So I've got the short attached, and we'll jump to the load. So each of these, I'm just pulling it off the SMA connector. This has got a 50 ohm termination inside it. Make sure it's screwed down, so we'll hit load. Next up is isolation. So isolation, ideally, we would have a 50 ohm termination on each port. I don't have that because I've only got one 50 ohm test standard. So in that case, we're going to put it here on our second port and isolation. And then the last one here is through. So we're actually going to go from port 0 to 1 or 1 to 2, depending on how you look at it. So all I've got here is just a simple piece of Teflon coax with SMA connectors on each end. And we're connecting from one port to the other. And you'll notice here on the side as we've completed, we've now got DT and X. This is going to balance out the rest of the calibration for us. So we calculate the through, we tell the instrument that we're done. Our calibration now shows all of the parameters, and we're going to go ahead and save that, in this case, in slot 1. What that's done is that saved everything for us, the channels that we've got selected, the parameters that we're displaying, and our calibration itself. So now we've got our calibration plane at these connectors, and we're ready to go ahead and do a quick test here. So let's start out looking at a couple of things. I've got, if I can see in my light here real quick, I actually can't see what it is. This is a little attenuator, a little mini circuits attenuator that I use with my spectrum analyzer. And all I'm going to do is attach this here. And we're going to calculate, in this case, or look at a through measurement. So we want to look at the logarithmic magnitude of the S21 or through parameter, transmission parameter. And so let's select that so that we can look at the correct scale here. We'll go into display and trace. We'll select trace 1, go back. And our scale here is 1 division per dB. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So we can see here this is a 3 dB attenuator, and we can see its characteristics. Again, 101 points from 50 kilohertz to 1 gig is pretty rough, but you can see the example here that that's what we've got. So let's jump into, I'm going to start sharing my screen again. For the balance of the presentation here, I'm going to use, I'll leave this display up so that you can see the video, but I'm also going to be sharing my screen so that you can see the Nano VNA Saver software here. So we'll share. One second, bring this over. I'm going to share my screen, and it's a bit of a messy desktop, so you'll have to deal with that. Screen 1, there we go. So we should be seeing my messy screen 1 here, and it's a simple Python program. Takes it a minute to fire up, and I've got the instrument here connected via USB-C connection to a USB port on my PC. So it'll fire up here in just a second or two. We'll start seeing a little bit of activity out of it as it starts talking to the instrument and establishes the connection there. And what it'll do is it'll bring up something that looks very much like the main screen on a lot of professional spectrum analyzer or VNAs, network analyzers here. We'll go ahead and maximize this. I've got serial port connected here. We're going to go ahead and connect to the device, and we're starting to see some activity here. So at this point, we see that we're scanning from 50 kilohertz to 1 gigahertz in one segment. This is where we can actually expand the usability or the functionality of this particular instrument. Is we can now set 10 segments, and each of those segments is going to have 101 points. So we now have 10 segments of 101 points. So instead of each individual segment being 10 megahertz, we're now at 1 megahertz per step. And we can go ahead and do a quick sweep, and it'll talk to the instrument, and it will plot out here our parameters as we expect them to be. Again, for this attenuator, a 3 dB attenuator that's attached to it. So you can see here that it's doing its deal and doing its scan. We can set it to sweep continuously. We can sweep multiple times to confirm that our trace or that things are behaving as we expect them to. You'll see the progress there, and you can get pretty carried away with it if you choose to do so. But it'll auto scale. We can adjust the things that we're seeing on the screen if we choose to do so. Looking at our Smith chart, we can see that we're sitting right at 50 ohms, so it's doing what it needs to do pretty well. We can also see up right here, if we change the data axis here, and it's currently doing an automatic span. We could adjust this so that we can see, but this is our 3 dB, 0 to 10 to 20, and this is our S21 parameter, or our through parameter, and we're seeing that that's acting exactly as we would expect it to there. Let's jump to a couple of other things. Let's look, for instance, at here's an example that we might use. We might have a dummy load or a termination that we want to characterize. In this case, we'll take a look at one that's, in this case, just a 50 ohm termination, and we'll stick it here on the Nano VNA. This is just a single port measurement. We're just simply measuring, in this case, the reflection coefficient. We'll do the same sweep, 10 segments, 50 kilohertz to 1 gig, and we'll see what it does here. So as we're looking here at the return loss, we can also look at the SWR. We can look at, in this case, we could do the TDR here. It's going to tell us the approximate length. There's a little small cable that I attached to it. So if we look at it here, our return loss, it looks like we've got a little bit of nonlinearity here. For a cheap termination, it's not terrible. We see that it performs kind of adequately at the high and the low end, and a little questionably right in the middle there. We look at the time domain reflectometry, and we can see that the cable that I've attached here, it estimates based on the velocity factor. In this case, we know that we've got RG316. It estimates that it's 10.1 inches. And if we stick a tape measure on there, it's within about half an inch. It's pretty amazing. So an example that we can characterize something simple like that. Let's look at something that might be a little more applicable to the everyday ham that maybe doesn't play with spectrum analyzers and things like attenuators and terminations. What I've got is an SMA jumper, in this case, that's attached to my pretty poor antenna in the backyard. Living in a subdivision, it's the best I've got, but it doesn't do very well. I'll be honest. It's at about 25 feet on a good end and about 12 on the other. It's an off-center fed dipole that's shortened with a coil because I've only got about 67 feet that I can get out of it from the corner of the house. But enough excuses there. We know that it's an antenna, and any antenna is better than no antenna. So let's see how it performs. What we're going to do here is we're going to look at our sweep. In this case, the sweep settings. And the developers of the software have given us a pretty easy way that we can jump in here and select, in this case, we're just going to look at 80 meters. And we want to pad the band limits by 10%, so that's going to go a little wider span for us. And we'll set that band sweep. And what we see here is that we now have a start of 3.47 meg, stop of 3.8 meg, which covers most of the 80 meter band, but not quite there. I'm not sure why that didn't do that. Let's bump that up just a bit. We'll go to 4.25 megahertz, and we'll go ahead and do our sweep. And a little fair warning, it's not super pretty. It's not an ideal antenna, and this is the one that got put up after the storm, so I don't have it dialed in yet. And as you can see here, our SWR is actually pretty poor across the 80 meter band. Let's take a little broader span and look at what we've actually got going on and try to figure out where it's resonant at so that we can get a little better idea of what we're doing. What I've done is I've expanded the sweep from 2.5 megahertz to 5.5 megahertz, sticking with that 10 segments because that gives me a pretty granular, about 3 kilohertz per step, and I'm going to do a sweep on that. And what this will do for us is it'll tell us where our resonant point is at, and what we need to do maybe to get it closer to resonance. Remember, a high return loss is indicating resonance for us. So this dip here is what we want to see. We just want that to be in the band of interest. So somewhere between 3.5 and 4 megahertz. And unfortunately, if we look at the marker 1 here, we're resonant about 3.37. We really want this. Let's grab a marker here. Let's do 3.5 megahertz and up through 4 megahertz. And so if we look here, we're resonant down here with marker 1 in this top right graph, VSWR. We really want to be resonant between the green and the blue. So what we need to do is to shift that resonant point higher, and in this case, it's easy enough to shorten the antenna. So the antenna is too long for 80 meters, and I probably need to shorten it. Well, let's take another quick look here, and what we're going to do is jump in sweep settings. We're going to take a quick look at the 40 meter band, and we'll set the band sweep here. And so we're stopping, we want to, let's bump that up to 7.4 megahertz, and let's sweep it and see what we do. So we know we're too long on 80. Let's see what we got to do on 40 here. Well, the SWR overall is better. We're about 2.25 here, and unfortunately, we're not resonant or fully resonant in the 40 meter band here. So let's expand it out just a little bit. We're going, let's go 6.5 megahertz to, let's go 8 megahertz. And we'll sweep that real quick. Oops. I didn't punch in megahertz here. It wants to see that. I know what I meant. It doesn't. And what we'll see here is that the resonant point is just outside the 40 meter band, in which case it's actually too short on 40, and so our resonant frequency is about 7.6 megahertz. So now I've got a quandary. I'm too long on 80. I'm already too short on 40. Maybe I can get by adjusting the loading coil that's in there. There's some question on what I might need or want to do, but this gives me a view very similar to what an antenna analyzer is, but I can adjust it a lot more granularly. I can see my return loss. I can graph out what I look like here on the Smith chart. You'll see that 0.3 here represents my 50 ohms and purely resistive load. The balance of the antenna over the range is very inductive, and so there's some options that I could perhaps use in there to add some capacitance and maybe bring that into better performance. So just an indication there of how we might use something like that. So that's an antenna. Let's look at a couple more quick use cases, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So I've got the antenna disconnected here. What I'm going to share now is a quick scan of a, in this case, one of the club's filters. So these are the field day filters that Jerry K0CQ has homebrewed. We've used them a lot. I've pulled out the 20 meter pair, which consists of a high pass and a low pass filter. The high pass at 10 megahertz, and the low pass at 18, it looks like. And this will be a through measurement, so we'll connect to port 1, and then we'll connect up the other end back into port 2, and we'll do a quick sweep and see what this guy looks like. So we know that we've got the 20-meter band covered here. So let's just start real quick with a sweep settings, and we'll take a look at the 20-meter band, and let's look outside. Let's go double, and we're going to set our band sweep, and we'll take a look at it and see what that looks like. So we're sweeping right now from 13.6 to 14.7 megahertz. And this is with the two paired up, a bandpass filter, in theory, for 20 meters. You'll notice that we're a little outside that, but not terribly so, at least for the resonant point. But we don't get a real good picture here. We can see our SWR on the low ends, maybe a little higher than we might like. Our through parameter here looks pretty good. We've got here on the low end, we're losing, let's see, our marker 3 here, just under 2 dB, and on the high end here, about 0.94. So not terrible. Let's do a little bit broader search here. Let's bump this out. Let's take a look and see what it would look like if we're at the top of the 40-meter band. So we'll start at 7.5 meg, and let's pump up to the bottom of the 15-meter band, so 21 megahertz. And I forgot to do the megahertz up here, so let's do that real quick, and let's sweep it and see what it looks like. And we'll see the characteristic bandpass filter down here in this quadrant right here. What we're measuring here in this case is both our S11 and our S21 parameters. So S11, remember, is our reflection, and S21 is our through or transmit parameter. So what we see is that in this range here, from marker 3 at 12.14 meg through, and let's bump down about right there to about 17 meg, that's our pass band. There's actually some analysis tools in here, and what we're going to do in this case is we'll select bandpass filter, and we're going to put marker 1 in the pass band, which it should be. And let's get back to that window real quick. Let's close that guy. And so it says place marker 1 in the filter pass band, and we're going to run that analysis. And what it does is it pops up and it tells us the center frequency is 14.2 megahertz, which, not surprisingly, Jerry's done a great job, and it's right smack dab in the middle of 20 meters. That's our center frequency. Our 3 dB and 6 dB bandwidths are listed here. So our 6 dB bandwidth is 6.4 megahertz. So we end up with a 6 dB cutoff of 11.5 megahertz, and the upper side cutoff of 6 dB at 18 megahertz. So it does exactly as advertised. Now, could it maybe be dialed in a little bit? Perhaps. Filters are hard to design. You end up with a lot of bumps and wiggles in there, and everything kind of interplays and interacts on each other. But it tells us that this filter is doing what it's supposed to do. The center frequency is dead on, and our 6 dB points are where we would expect them to be to act as a band pass filter for 20 megahertz. One last measurement, and then we'll open it up here for Q&A. So I'm going to disconnect the filter, and the next item that I'm going to connect up here is a piece of coax that I'm using a short one just because it's one that I had and it was easy enough to pack around. But in this case, it's just a single piece of coax that happened to have the end cut off on it. Actually, it got ripped off when the neighbor's trampoline took out my antenna. That's the whole saga. But what I want to do is demonstrate just quickly how the time domain reflectometry can serve us pretty well. So what I've got here is that's connected up. There's a small jumper. You can't quite see off camera here. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to disconnect, and then I'm going to reconnect. And what that'll do is that will reload my scan. Oh, no, it won't, because I haven't done that yet. 1 second here. So I'm going to disconnect. We're going to recall. We saved our parameters in 1. We're going to reconnect here, and that will put us in, again, our 50 kilohertz to 1 gigahertz sweep. We're going to go ahead and sweep this guy, and he's going to jump across awful quick. That was too fast. I need my 10 segments. We'll sweep one more time. And what this will do here is this is sweeping the entire range again. Just because in this case, I don't know how long it is, it's going to give us some indication. You'll see here what we're seeing is a phenomenon called ringing, which is indicative of a problem with the feed line. Either it's open or short, and we're getting reflections, and those waves are bouncing back and forth inside, but we can see this ringing. What we do see here in this lower left quadrant is TDR, and it's come up with a measurement that it thinks is appropriate. We'll jump into TDR here, and in this case, I've got a velocity factor of 0.66. I looked it up on the manufacturer's website, and 0.66 is what we've got. That's typical for a hard polyethylene. In this case, it's RG213. So with that, it tells me that my total length is 6 foot 7.6 inches. Now, remember my calibration plane was at the end of the device. I've got a short pigtail here of 6 inches, and I've got a cable that is exactly 6 foot 1 inch. So when we look at this number, it's pretty phenomenal that just by bouncing some signals down a feed line, measuring the open end that's actually a cut piece of coax, it can tell us within an inch the length of what we've got. This could be used in the case that you've got a damaged piece of coax, maybe feeding an antenna, and you're having trouble getting a match and you're not sure where you need to go look. Maybe your feed line's buried, and somewhere underground you've got a fault in your line. You could use this TDR capacity and get an idea of where you need to dig, measure back and approximate so that you can start looking at that particular point without maybe having to replace the entire feed line. So with that, let's jump back to the presentation here. I think I've got one more slide to show everyone, which is some resources that are available. This will be published on my website, kb7vml.net or w0yr.com or .net. They all go to the same place. I'll publish this there. There's links that you can click on. A couple of really helpful YouTube channels that I've found. They don't all cover Nano VNA. It's a lot of other technical topics, but there are a number of Nano VNA and test and measurement type videos there. W2AEW, Alan, does a phenomenal job. Very much heart of a teacher. He does a great job of explaining very complex principles very readily. Does a fantastic job. MSci guy, you can guess what his background is and what he likes, but he also plays with a lot of Nano VNA and various RF stuff and a few other things. He's into watch building and a few other hobbies as well. A couple of groups IO pages that I like, Nano VNA users. You'll find that there's a lot of discussion on there about the Nano VNA H and the Nano VNA F. The instrument that I've demonstrated tonight is the Nano VNA F. And the reason that I selected it was because it had a metal case with shielding and a larger screen with an IPS display. So it's very bright in sunlight versus some of the others that can be more difficult to see in the outdoors. It makes it a little bit more expensive device. It's got an RT, real-time operating system on it versus some of the other devices that are microcontroller based. But the end result is that in my opinion, it's a much more robust instrument. The last one is a group specifically to the Nano VNAF, and again, that's the device that I've got here tonight. So with that, I'll turn on my lights here, we'll switch cameras, and we'll open it up for questions.
Mike here.
Yeah, go ahead.
And yeah, I've got one, and it's a great piece of instrumentation. I found that I use the eraser part of to tap the screen. That works just fine. And
oh, great tip.
I've used it to measure the isolation on a duplexer.
Mhm.
It uses a Mode J filter, and it works pretty good.
Yeah, it's surprising how robust an instrument it actually is for the price point. Some of these are down in the $50 range, and for something that compares pretty favorably against a multi-thousand-dollar instrument in the representation of the device itself, it's truly phenomenal. So that's great to hear that you've got one and some experience with it, Mike. Thanks. Other questions?
So, Paul, this is Bill.
Yes.
Very nice talk. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So I have two questions. One is that you're getting 2 of these S numbers. What else could you do if you had all 4?
If we had additionals, we could measure larger networks. Really, that's all that we benefit from. For our amateur use, the 2 parameters are really what we're looking at for our purposes here. If we had, let's say a larger amplifier network or something like that, we might have some benefits of having an S22, additional ports and receivers available to us. But realistically, for what we're using, the parameters are pretty much what we would want to go after. In fact, a lot of guys aren't even going to use the S21, depending on, again, what you're doing. Most guys grab it, they end up using it for check out an antenna, and that's about it. In those cases, it's that's about it. So. Okay.
So the other question is that when you started, you were showing us the screen on this little device.
Yes.
And I might have missed something, but then you switched to some other software that you're using. Is that software that comes with the device? Is there sort of an open source software effort?
Yes.
For VNA type devices?
No, absolutely great question there, Bill. And I should have clarified that, I guess, a little bit more. So it's hard to see everything and represent everything on a 4-inch, and in some cases, these are 2.8-inch displays. The folks in the Nano VNA community have written this software that's called Nano VNA Saver, S-A-V-E-R. And it was originally designed so that you could save out the parameters. That was what it was for, really to an Excel spreadsheet so that you could analyze the parameters and do. And they build it up into this program that honestly now is pretty remarkable in its functionality. So this Nano VNA Saver software is available. It is open source. So if you search for Nano VNA Saver, it'll take you to a GitHub site. That's GitHub, and you'll find the code that's there. But you'll also find the compiled binaries that you can download for Mac, for Linux, for Windows. They're all out there and available. So great question, Bill. I'm glad I had a chance to clarify that.
Good, thanks a lot. Appreciate
Yeah, it really expands the ability because we're limited to 101 segments just by the design of the device, the instrument here. So if we look at it that we can only do 101, it limits us. But the software allows us to do these multiple sweeps of segments so that we can then end up with more data points, and that expands the functionality significantly.
Hey, Paul, if you could go back briefly to the slide that shows the S21 and 22, that thing right there.
Yep.
That might point out a little bit more about Bill's question about what do you get for your measurements, right? Your other ports are used for the other measurements you talked about in the wider, broader networks. Well, like, for example, on the output side of the load, if you were talking about an amplifier, for example, right?
No, that's thanks, Jason, for calling that out. You can see here the S22, S12. Really, it's the reverse side. You could feed it back through. There are some measurements where you might end up swapping cables from port to port and measuring the reverse and then measuring back. That would be a case that you might gain some from a more complex instrument. But realistically, you're looking at probably something minimum in the $2,000 range. And even then, you might not end up with with a multi-port device. So good question, Bill, and thanks, Jason, for highlighting that. Any other questions?
No problem. I like pictures, and I remember you showed that one. So
Yeah, no, thank you.
I'm blown away, Paul. You know, for $125 and less, it sounds like for other options.
Yep.
The capabilities you got are just tremendous, because when you think about hams, you know how cheapskates we are, right? We're looking for secondhand gear at Ham Fest with parts broken, and we're going to get a discount on it, but we want a good piece of equipment.
Right.
Well, man, we don't have to compromise anymore. Here it is, better probably in some cases than some of the commercial gear.
Yeah.
So I'm just blown away.
No, I really was too when I jumped into it. I've had one of the Nano VNAs for about a year now. I bought one device and then upgraded to a newer version that has some different interface buttons. But yeah, it's truly phenomenal what's available out there and at the price point that it is. So we live in wondrous times. Any other questions?
Yeah, what was the other device that you had? This one's the F, and was one of the other ones a Hugin one or one of the newer SAA ones?
It was actually also a Nano VNA-F, but the difference was, I keep pointing because I think I've got my camera here. Let me unmount it real quick, and I'll show everyone the what I'm talking about. So they in this case, BH5HNU is the designer of the Nano VNA-F, and what he did is instead of using the rocker wheel, which you can click in on and then roll up and roll down, I found it kind of finicky myself, but he's just got 3 buttons, so it's up, it's down, and it's click to select. That to me was worth the upgrade. It shipped. It was a birthday present to me, and it shipped right in the middle of the original shutdown of all of the pandemic stuff. So it languished in Singapore for several months. It was supposed to be delivered in 2 weeks, languished in Singapore for several months, eventually found its way onto a boat. It was supposed to enter through San Francisco. It ended up in New York. And then the USPS took their sweet time, and almost 3 weeks after it left the port of New York, it finally arrived. But it did get here, and again, pretty remarkable for what it is. So, great question, Dan. Thanks. All right, any other questions? All right, we'll stop sharing my screen here.